They say a father's love is unconditional. They say the church is a sanctuary. They told me to trust, to obey, to be grateful. But when I was 8 years old, my father shook hands with a priest and sold me like livestock to pay his debts. For 11 years I lived in that hell, silent and small. Until the day I held a scalpel in my trembling hand and realized that the same tool used to heal could also cut away the rot. What I did that night didn't make me a monster, it made me free. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of abuse hidden behind closed doors. Now let me tell you what really happened. I remember the smell of whiskey on my father's breath the night he gave me away. It wasn't the first time he'd been drinking. Mama had died 2 years before, taken by pneumonia in the winter when we couldn't afford a doctor. After she was gone, Daddy changed. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders became a stranger who stumbled through our front door at odd hours, reeking of liquor and failure. I was 8 years old, sitting at our kitchen table doing homework by candlelight, because the electricity had been shut off again. My stomach growled. I'd eaten nothing but a slice of bread that morning, but I didn't complain. Complaining made Daddy angry, and when Daddy got angry, his hands got heavy. The knock at the door came just after sunset. "Stay there, Grace," Daddy muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He stumbled to the door and opened it. Father Benedict Harrow stood on our porch like a crow perched on a fence post. He was tall and thin, dressed in his black clergy clothes, with silver hair slicked back from a face that smiled but never reached his eyes. I'd seen him at church, of course. Everyone in our small town knew Father Harrow. He was the man who blessed babies, who presided over funerals, who supposedly spoke directly to God. "Richard," Father Harrow said, his voice smooth as oil, "may I come in?" Daddy stepped aside without a word. Father Harrow entered our shabby little house and looked around with barely concealed disgust. His eyes swept over the peeling wallpaper, the sagging furniture, the empty bottles lined up on the counter like soldiers. Then his gaze landed on me. I felt cold when he looked at me. Cold in a way I couldn't explain. "This is Grace?" he asked. "Yes, Father," Daddy said, wringing his hands. "She's a good girl, quiet, obedient. Does what she's told." Father Harrow walked closer. I pressed myself back in my chair, suddenly afraid in a way I'd never been afraid of anything before. He reached out and tilted my chin up with one long finger, examining my face the way Mama used to examine apples at the market. Checking for bruises, for flaws. "She'll do," he said finally. "Do for what?" I whispered. No one answered me. Father Harrow reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope thick with cash. He placed it on the table in front of my father. "This covers your debts to Mr. Morrison and the remainder of your rent for 6 months. After that, you're on your own. The girl comes with me tonight." My heart stopped. "Daddy?" I looked at my father, waiting for him to laugh, to tell this priest he was crazy, to throw him out of our house. "Daddy, what's he talking about?" My father wouldn't look at me. He stared at that envelope like it was salvation itself, his hands trembling as he reached for it. "She'll work at the church," Father Harrow explained, as if I wasn't even there. "Cleaning, cooking, helping with the medical clinic we run in the parish hall. She'll have food, shelter, and a Christian education. It's far more than she has here." "I want to stay with Daddy," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, I'll be good. I'll be Grace." My father finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't love or regret. It was relief. "Go pack your things. You're gonna live at the church now. It's better this way." "No." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No, Daddy. Please." "No, Giras." I flinched at his shout. Then I ran to my tiny bedroom and shoved my few possessions into a paper bag. 2 dresses, a sweater Mama had knitted, a small wooden horse Daddy had carved for me when I was little, back when he still loved me. When I came back out, Father Harrow was waiting by the door. My father had already opened the envelope and was counting the bills, his face slack with relief and shame. "Daddy," I whispered one last time. "Please don't make me go." He didn't answer. Didn't hug me. Didn't even look up. Father Harrow placed a cold hand on my shoulder. "Come along, child. Your new life begins now." I walked out of that house and into the darkness, carrying everything I owned in a paper bag. Behind me I heard my father open another bottle. I never lived in that house again, and I never called him Daddy again either. The rectory behind St. Michael's Church was nothing like I'd imagined. From the outside it looked peaceful. A neat brick building with white shutters and a garden where roses bloomed in the summer. But inside it was cold. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the absence of love. Father Harrow led me through the back entrance, past the kitchen where an older woman was scrubbing pots with her head down, and up a narrow staircase to the 3rd floor. We walked down a hallway lined with doors, all closed, all silent. "This is your room," he said, opening the last door on the left. The room was tiny, barely big enough for the narrow bed, the small dresser, and the wooden chair shoved in the corner. There was one window, but it had bars on it. For your safety, Father Harrow said when he saw me looking at them. But I knew better. Those bars weren't to keep danger out, they were to keep me in. You'll wake at 5 every morning, he continued, his voice flat and businesslike. You'll help businesslike Patterson in the kitchen, clean the rectory, and assist in the medical clinic when we have patients. You'll attend daily mass. You'll speak only when spoken to. You'll go nowhere without permission. Do you understand? I nodded, clutching my paper bag to my chest. Use your words, child. Yes, father, I whispered. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Grace. No one in this town will help you if you try to run. Your father signed papers giving me legal guardianship. As far as the law is concerned, I own you. And God sees everything. Disobedience is a sin. Then he left, locking the door behind him. I sat on that thin mattress and cried until I had no tears left. Then I lay down in my clothes, too afraid to undress, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I learned what my new life would be. Mrs. Patterson, the woman I'd seen in the kitchen, woke me before dawn by pounding on my door. She was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a face carved from stone. She barely looked at me as she rattled off my duties. Kitchen by 5:15. Breakfast ready by 6:30. After father eats, you clean the dining room, the parlor, and his study. Never touch his desk. Lunch at clinic from 1 to 4. Dinner at 6. Evening prayers at 8. Bed by 9. Questions?
No, ma'am,
I said. Good. Don't make me repeat myself. The work was endless. My hands, soft from childhood, cracked in blood from the harsh soap. My back ached from scrubbing floors on my hands and knees. I learned to move silently, to make myself invisible, because Father Harrow didn't like to hear children. But the worst part wasn't the work. The worst part was the clinic. Twice a week, Father Harrow opened the parish hall to provide free medical care to the poor. It sounded charitable. The whole town praised him for it. But I saw what happened behind those closed doors. The clinic was run by Father Harrow himself, though he had no medical training. He'd studied to be a doctor before joining the seminary, he claimed, so he knew enough to be dangerous. He dispensed medicines, stitched wounds, set broken bones. All while speaking in that smooth, calm voice that made people trust him. But his hands wandered. Especially with the young girls who came in. I was 9 when I first understood what he was doing. A girl about my age came in with her mother, complaining of stomach pain. Father Harrow sent the mother to the waiting room to reduce her anxiety, and examined the girl alone. I was in the corner, organizing supplies, trying to be invisible. I watched his hands move where they shouldn't. Watched the girl's face go blank with confusion and fear. Watched her mother thank him afterward, never knowing. And I said nothing. Because I was a coward. Because I was 9 years old and terrified. Because when I tried to speak up once, just once, Father Harrow locked me in my room for 3 days with nothing but water and told me that lying about a priest was a mortal sin that would send me straight to hell. So I learned to be silent. I learned to make myself small. I learned to survive. But I also learned to watch, to remember, to keep a list in my mind of every girl he touched, every wound he caused, every sin he committed while wearing that white collar. Years passed. I turned 10, then 11, then 12. My body started changing, and Father Harrow's attention shifted more fully to me. The locked door at night, the inappropriate comments, the hands that lingered too long. I wanted to die. Sometimes I stood at my barred window and imagined jumping, imagined the freedom of falling, imagined the mercy of never waking up. But something in me refused to give him that victory, so I endured. Day after day, year after year, I endured, until the day I met Dr. Sarah Chen. I was 16 when Dr. Sarah Chen walked into St. Michael's Clinic and changed everything. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, carrying a leather medical bag and wearing a determined expression that Father Harrow clearly didn't appreciate. She was in her mid-40s, with short black hair streaked with gray and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I'm Dr. Chen, she announced, setting her bag on the examination table. The county medical board sent me to inspect your facility. There have been concerns. Father Harrow's smile didn't waver, but I saw his jaw tighten. Of course, doctor. Though I assure you, everything here is above board. We provide a valuable service to those who cannot afford proper care. We'll see, Dr. Chen said coolly. I was in my usual corner, restocking bandages, trying to disappear. But Dr. Chen's gaze found me immediately. And who is this? She asked. Grace. My ward. She assists me in the clinic. Dr. Chen walked over to me, and for the first time in 8 years, someone looked at me and really saw me. Her eyes moved over the bruises on my arms, some old, some new. The way I held myself, hunched and protective, the flinch when Father Harrow moved suddenly. How old are you, Grace? Her voice was gentle. 16, Mom. I whispered. Do you attend school? I shook my head. Father Harrow interrupted before I could speak. She receives her education here. I teach her myself reading, writing, arithmetic, and scripture. Dr. Chen's mouth formed a thin line, but she said nothing more. She spent the next 2 hours examining the clinic, asking pointed questions, making notes in a small leather journal. Father Harrow followed her, his explanations growing more defensive, his smile more strained. When she finally left, Father Harrow was furious. He slammed the clinic door so hard the windows rattled. That woman, he hissed, is going to be a problem. He was right, but not in the way he thought. Dr. Chen returned the following week, and the week after that, and the week after that. The medical board had mandated weekly inspections, and Dr. Chen had volunteered for the assignment. Father Harrow couldn't refuse without raising suspicions, so he smiled and cooperated and seethed in private. But Dr. Chen didn't come just to inspect. She came to teach. Grace, she said during her third visit, hand me the suture kit, please. I brought it to her, and she gestured to the chair beside her. Sit. Watch carefully. This is how you close a wound properly. She had a patient, a construction worker who'd gashed his arm on a piece of metal. As she worked, she explained every step. The importance of cleaning the wound, the angle of the needle, the spacing of the stitches. Father Harrow watched from across the room, suspicious but unable to object. After all, what could be wrong with educating the girl? But Dr. Chen was teaching me more than medicine. She was teaching me that I had value, that I could learn, that my hands could heal, not just scrub and serve. Week after week she taught me anatomy, physiology, how to read vital signs, how to recognize infections, how to administer medications. She brought me textbooks, old medical manuals she claimed she no longer needed, and I devoured them in my locked room at night, reading by moonlight. You're bright, she told me one afternoon when Father Harrow had stepped out. Very bright. You could be a nurse, Grace. Maybe even a doctor if you wanted. I stared at her. I'm nothing. I'm nobody? No. Her voice was firm. You are someone who survived. That takes more strength than most people will ever know. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small anatomy textbook. This is for you. Hide it. Study it. And Grace, she looked me directly in the eyes. If you ever need help, if you ever want to leave this place, you call me day or night. She pressed a business card into my palm. On it was her name, her number, and the address of her practice. I can't? I whispered. He'll find me. He has papers, legal guardianship. You're 16. In 2 years you'll be 18, a legal adult. He'll have no power over you then. Until that day comes, learn everything you can. Make yourself strong. And when the time is right, her eyes were fierce. You run, and you don't look back. For the first time in 8 years, I felt something I thought had died the night my father sold me. Hope. Over the next year I studied. Every medical text Dr. Chen gave me I memorized. Every lesson she taught I absorbed. I learned about the human body, its systems, its vulnerabilities, its capacity for both healing and harm. I learned where arteries ran close to the surface. I learned which nerves controlled which functions. I learned that with the right knowledge and the right tool, a person could be stopped without being killed. I learned that a scalpel in the right hands was power. I was 17 when Father Harrow's behavior escalated. The touches became grabs, the comments became threats. He'd grown bolder over the years, more confident that I would never speak, never resist, never fight back. He was wrong. One night in December, he came to my room after evening prayers. I heard his key in the lock and felt ice flood my veins. He stepped inside, closed the door, and smiled that terrible smile. You're not a child anymore, Grace, he said softly. It's time you understood your purpose here. But I was ready. Hidden beneath my mattress was a scalpel Dr. Chen had accidentally left behind during her last visit. I'd kept it, sharpened it, practiced holding it in the dark until it felt like an extension of my hand. When Father Harrow reached for me, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't freeze, I moved. Chiapdr for the cut. The scalpel was in my hand before he could blink. Father Harrow froze, his eyes widening as he stared at the blade catching the moonlight from my barred window. For the first time in 9 years, I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Fear, Grace, he said slowly, his voice taking on that smooth, calming tone he used with frightened patience. Put that down. You don't want to do something you'll regret. I won't regret it. I said. My voice was steady, calm. I barely recognized it as my own. I've regretted every day I stayed silent. Every day I let you hurt me. Every day I watched you hurt others. But not anymore. He took a step forward. If you hurt me, he said, you'll go to prison. You'll be arrested. No one will believe you. I'm a priest. You're just a what? I interrupted. Nobody. A thing you bought. A girl with no voice. Chen's lessons ran through my mind like a current. The brachial artery, the femoral nerve. I knew exactly where to cut to disable without killing. I knew how deep, how precise, how permanent. I learned from the best, I said quietly. Dr. Chen taught me well. She taught me about the human body, about how fragile it really is, About how a single cut in exactly the right place can change everything. Father Harrow's back hit the door. He was trapped, and he knew it. She taught me about the pudendal nerve. I continued, my voice cold as winter. Do you know what that is, Father? You should. It's the nerve that controls everything you've used to hurt me. To hurt those girls. One precise cut, and it's gone. Forever. You'd live, but you'd never hurt anyone again. His face went white. You wouldn't. You're not a killer. You're right, I'm not. I raised the scalpel slightly. But I am someone who's done being a victim. We stood there in the darkness, predator and prey with roles reversed. Every terrible thing he'd done to me, every wound he'd inflicted, every piece of innocence he'd stolen, it all hung in the air between us. I could do it, I knew exactly how. Dr. Chen had taught me the anatomy. My hands were steady. One cut, and he would never destroy another child. But then I heard Dr. Chen's voice in my memory. Your hands could heal. Grace. Don't let him turn you into something you're not. I lowered the scalpel slightly. Here's what's gonna happen, I said. You're gonna unlock this door. You're gonna walk downstairs. You're gonna sit in your study. And you're not gonna move until morning. And then what? He asked, his voice shaking. And then I'm gonna call Dr. Chen. I'm gonna tell her everything. She'll know what to do. Father Harrow's fear shifted to something uglier, calculation. No one will believe you. I have legal guardianship. I have the respect of this entire town. You have nothing. I have the names, I said softly. Every girl you touched, every family you fooled, I watched. I remembered. I wrote them all down. That was a lie. I hadn't written anything down, too dangerous. But Father Harrow didn't know that. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wavered. Try me. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then he reached behind him, unlocked the door, and stepped backward into the hallway. This isn't over, he said. Yes, I replied. It is. I closed the door and listened to his footsteps retreat down the stairs. Then I shoved my dresser against the door, wedged the chair under the handle, and sat on my bed with the scalpel in my lap, watching the door until dawn broke. I didn't sleep. I couldn't, because I knew that come morning everything would change. Either I would finally be free, or I would be destroyed. At first light, I heard Mrs. Patterson moving around downstairs, starting breakfast. I heard Father Harrow's door open and close, the house settling into its familiar routine as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. I waited until I heard Father Harrow leave for early mass. Then I moved the dresser, grabbed Dr. Chen's business card from its hiding place in my mattress, and crept down to the kitchen where there was a phone. Mrs. Patterson looked up from the stove. You're up early. I need to make a call, I said. Father doesn't allow personal calls. I don't care what Father allows anymore. Something in my voice made her step back. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I'd memorized months ago. Dr. Chen answered on the second ring. Dr. Chen speaking. It's Grace. My voice cracked on my own name. I need help. I need it now. Where are you? The rectory. But he's at mass. I have maybe an hour before he comes back. Stay on the line. Don't hang up. I'm getting in my car right now. I heard rustling, the jingle of keys, a door slamming. Grace, listen to me carefully. Do you have your belongings? Just what I came with. A bag. Get it. Get anything important. Wait by the back door. I'll be there in 20 minutes. If he comes back before I arrive, you run. Do you understand? You run and you don't stop. Wes. I'm coming, Grace. I'm coming right now. You're gonna be okay? I held that phone like a lifeline, listening to Dr. Chen's voice, to the sound of her car engine, to the promise of rescue I'd dreamed about for 9 years. Mrs. Patterson stood in the corner, watching me with wide eyes. You're leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. We won't let you go. He doesn't have a choice anymore. She was quiet for a moment. Then, to my surprise, she walked to the pantry and pulled out a small tin box. From it, she took a folded piece of paper and handed it to me. What is this? I asked. Names, she said quietly. Girls who came to the clinic. Girls who left different than they came. I wrote them down. I was too afraid to do anything with them. But maybe you're braver than I am. I stared at the paper, then at Mrs. Patterson. She'd known. All these years she'd known, and she'd done nothing. But she was doing something now. Thank you, I whispered. 17 minutes later, Dr. Chen's car screeched to a stop outside the back door. Dr. Chen burst through the back door like an avenging angel. She took one look at me, pale, shaking, clutching my paper bag and Mrs. Patterson's list, and her face hardened into something fierce. Let's go, she said. What? I turned to Mrs. Patterson. Come with us. You don't have to stay here either. The older woman shook her head. I'm too old to start over. But you have your whole life ahead of you. Go. Quickly, Dr. Chen took my arm and led me to her car. As we pulled away from St. Michael's, I looked back at the rectory, at the church with its white steeple pointing toward heaven like an accusation. I never wanted to see it again. But Dr. Chen had other plans. We're not running, Grace, she said as she drove. We're fighting. She took me to her home, a modest house on the edge of town with bookshelves lining every wall, and a guest room that she told me was mine for as long as I needed. She made me tea, gave me clean clothes, and sat across from me at her kitchen table. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning." So I did, every terrible detail, every moment of those 9 years. When I finished, my voice was hoarse and my face was wet with tears I didn't remember crying. Chen's expression was carved from stone. "You're not the first," she said quietly. "I suspected when I first saw you. The way you moved, the fear in your eyes. I've seen it before in other victims. That's why I kept coming back. I needed to be sure. I needed to document." She pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. "Every visit I made to that clinic, I took notes, observed, photographed irregularities. I have records of medication discrepancies, of inappropriate examination procedures, of girls who came in with minor complaints and left traumatized." She spread the papers across the table. "And now, with your testimony and Mrs. Patterson's list, we have enough." "Enough for what?" I asked. "To bury him." The next morning, Dr. Chen and I walked into the county sheriff's office together. Sheriff Tom Morrison was a large man in his 50s with a weathered face and tired eyes. He looked up from his desk as we entered, and his expression immediately shuddered when he saw me. "Grace Thompson," he said slowly. "Father Harrow called this morning. Said you ran away from the church. Said you're disturbed, troubled. He's very worried about you." "I'm sure he is," Dr. Chen said coldly. "Sheriff Morrison, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I've been conducting medical inspections at St. Michael's Clinic for the past year under county mandate. I'm here to file a formal complaint against Father Benedict Harrow for child abuse, medical malpractice, and sexual assault of a minor." The sheriff's face paled. "Now, doctor, those are serious accusations, and I have serious evidence." Dr. Chen placed her folder on his desk. Medical records, photographic documentation, witness testimony, and a list of victims. She laid Mrs. Patterson's paper on top of the pile. 17 names, 17 girls. Sheriff Morrison stared at the list. I watched the color drain from his face as he recognized name after name. Daughters of families in the community, girls who'd grown up and moved away, girls who'd never spoken about what happened in that clinic. "Dear God," he whispered. "Grace is willing to testify," Dr. Chen continued. "She's willing to tell everything. But she's not the only one who needs to speak. Every girl on that list deserves justice." The sheriff looked at me, really looked at me. "Grace, are you certain about this? Once we start this, there's no going back. The whole town will know. People will talk. They'll take sides. Some will call you a liar. Let them," I said. My voice was steady. "I've been silent for 9 years. I'm done being silent." Sheriff Morrison picked up the phone. "I'll need to call the state police. This is bigger than my department can handle." The investigation took 3 months. During that time, I lived with Dr. Chen. She enrolled me in the local high school to finish my education. She helped me get my GD. She taught me to drive. She showed me what safety felt like. But the town turned against us. St. Michael's Church was the heart of the community. Father Harrow had baptized their babies, married their children, buried their parents. They wouldn't, believe that he was capable of such evil. People whispered when I walked down the street. "Liar. Ungrateful. Trying to destroy a good man's reputation." Some were crueler. I received threatening letters. Someone spray-painted WOR on Dr. Chen's garage door. The church congregation held prayer vigils for Father Harrow's persecution. My father gave an interview to the local paper, claiming I'd always been a difficult, disturbed child. That he'd given me to the church out of Christian charity, hoping Father Harrow could straighten me out. That I was mentally unstable and making up lies for attention. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. But then the other girls started coming forward. First, there was Emily Rodriguez. She was 23, living 2 towns over, working as a teacher. She saw the news about the investigation and drove to the sheriff's office with her own story. Father Harrow had examined her when she was 14. She'd tried to tell her parents, but they'd called her a liar and forced her to apologize to the priest. Then came Jennifer Walsh, and Maria Santos, and Amanda Chen. No relation to Dr. Chen, but she'd taken the name when she ran away from home at 16 after her parents refused to believe her. One by one they came. Brave women who'd carried their secrets for years, who'd learned to bury their trauma so deep they'd almost convinced themselves it hadn't happened. But it had happened. To all of us. By the time the state police finished their investigation, they had testimony from 12 women. 12 voices that couldn't be silenced or dismissed. The evidence was overwhelming. Father Benedict Harrow was arrested on 43 counts of child sexual abuse, assault, and practicing medicine without a license. The trial began 6 months after I walked out of that rectory. I sat in the courtroom every single day. So did Dr. Chen. So did the other survivors. Father Harrow's lawyers tried to paint us as liars, as troubled girls with grudges, as conspirators seeking money or attention. They attacked our characters, our backgrounds, our motives. But they couldn't attack the evidence. Chen's meticulous documentation, the medical records, the testimony of Mrs. Patterson, who finally found her courage and told everything she'd witnessed. The financial records showing that my father had indeed accepted money in exchange for custody of me. And then there was my testimony. I sat in that witness box for 4 hours and told my story. Every terrible moment, every wound, every scar. I looked Father Harrow in the eye and watched him try to maintain his mask of benevolent concern. But the mask was cracking. When the prosecutor asked me about the night I'd held the scalpel, I told the truth. I could have hurt him, I said. I knew exactly how. But I didn't. Because I'm not like him. I refuse to be like him. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Father Benedict Harrow was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He would be eligible for parole when he was 93 years old. He would die behind bars, his collar stripped away, his reputation destroyed, his power gone. And I would live free. The day after the verdict, I turned 18. Dr. Chen made me a cake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite. We sat in her kitchen, just the 2 of us, and she placed a small wrapped box in front of me. "Happy birthday, Grace," she said. Inside was a silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a caduceus, the medical symbol of 2 serpents wrapped around a winged staff. "You told me once that you were nothing," Dr. Chen said softly. "But I've watched you survive what would have destroyed most people. I've watched you find the courage to speak when silence would have been easier. I've watched you turn your pain into purpose. Grace, you are extraordinary. And I think you should become a nurse." I looked up at her, tears blurring my vision. "I'm not smart enough. I didn't even finish high school properly. You earned your GED with the highest scores the testing center had ever seen. You absorbed medical knowledge faster than students I taught in medical school. Grace, you are brilliant. Don't let what he did to you make you doubt that." She pushed an envelope across the table. Inside was an acceptance letter from the nursing program at the county college, along with a full scholarship funded by an anonymous donor. Though I knew exactly who had arranged it. "You start in the fall," Dr. Chen said. "If you want to." I clutched that letter like a lifeline. "I want to? Good, then let's get to work. You have a lot to learn." Nursing school was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and the most rewarding. I threw myself into my studies with a hunger that surprised even my instructors. Anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, patient care. I devoured it all. The human body, which had once been a source of shame and violation, became something I understood, respected, and could help heal. My classmates were kind, though few knew my story. I kept to myself mostly, focused on my work, on building a future that was mine alone. But not everyone had forgotten. In my second year, a woman approached me after class. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and nervous hands. "Grace Thompson?" she asked. I tensed immediately.
"Yes."
"I'm Helen Morrison. My daughter was," she was on the list. "Jennifer Morrison. She was 13 when Father Harrow," her voice broke. I didn't believe her when she tried to tell me. I thought she was making it up, trying to get attention. I made her apologize to him. I sent her back to that clinic. Tears streamed down her face. She ran away when she was 16. I didn't hear from her for 7 years. When she finally came home, when she testified at the trial, I learned what I'd done, what I'd let happen. She looked at me with such raw pain. I can't undo it. I can't take back what I failed to protect her from. But I wanted to thank you. You gave her the courage to speak. You gave her justice. You saved my daughter's life, and I will never be able to repay you." I didn't know what to say. So I just reached out and took her hand. "Tell her I'm proud of her," I said quietly. "Tell her she's not alone." Helen Morrison squeezed my hand and walked away, and I realized something profound. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every survivor who'd found their voice because I'd found mine. That responsibility was heavy. But it was also sacred. I graduated at the top of my nursing class. Dr. Chen was in the front row, cheering louder than anyone when I received my diploma. I got my first job at County General Hospital, working in the emergency room. The work was brutal, long shifts, difficult cases, people at their worst and most vulnerable. But I was good at it. I had a calmness in crisis, a gentleness with traumatized patients, an ability to see what others missed. My supervisor pulled me aside after 6 months. "Grace, you have a gift for working with assault victims. They trust you. They open up to you. Have you ever considered specializing?" I had. So I enrolled in additional training to become a sexual assault nurse examiner, a SAN nurse. These nurses provide specialized care to survivors of sexual assault, collecting evidence, documenting injuries, and offering compassionate support during the most vulnerable moments of a person's life. It was painful work. Every survivor I treated reminded me of myself, of that frightened girl locked in a room above a church, suffering in silence. But it was also healing work. Every person I helped, every hand I held, every gentle word I spoke, it was a way of saving the girl I used to be, over and over again. I worked that job for 20 years. Hundreds of survivors passed through my care. I held their hands during evidence collection. I testified in court when needed. I connected them with counselors, lawyers, advocates. I showed them that they were believed, that they mattered, that what happened to them was not their fault. And slowly, year by year, I healed too. Dr. Chen retired when I was 35. By then, she'd become more than a mentor. She was the mother I'd never really had. We had dinner together every Sunday. She taught me to garden, to cook, to laugh without looking over my shoulder. You did it. She told me one evening as we sat on her porch, watching the sunset. You took everything he tried to destroy and built something beautiful. I had help, I said, squeezing her hand. We all need help, Grace. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. We sat in comfortable silence, two women who'd fought battles most people couldn't imagine, who'd won not through violence but through persistence, courage, and love. I never married, never had children of my own. Some people found that sad, but I didn't. I had purpose. I had peace. I had a family of survivors who I cared for, who cared for me. I had students, young nurses I trained and mentored, passing on the knowledge Dr. Chen had given me. And I had freedom, real freedom. The kind that comes not from the absence of chains, but from the knowledge that you survived them and became stronger. My father died when I was 42. Liver failure, brought on by decades of drinking. He'd never recovered from the trial, from the public revelation that he'd sold his daughter. The town that had once defended Father Harrow turned their judgment on him instead. He asked to see me before he died. The hospice nurse called and told me he was requesting forgiveness, wanting to make peace. I didn't go. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. Some people don't deserve the closure they seek. I'd spent years in therapy learning that forgiveness isn't mandatory, that I didn't owe my abuser's peace at the expense of my own. I let him die with his guilt. It was the kindest thing I could do for myself. Father Harrow died in prison 10 years later. Heart attack. I received a letter from the prison chaplain, asking if I wanted to be notified of his death, if I had any words to say. I wrote back with just 2 sentences. I don't forgive him, but I'm free of him, and I was. I'm 72 years old now, sitting in my small apartment filled with photographs and memories. Sarah Chen passed away 5 years ago, peacefully in her sleep at 83. I was holding her hand when she went. Her last words to me were, "You became everything I knew you could be." I retired from nursing 3 years ago, but I didn't stop working. I couldn't. There were still too many people who needed help, too many voices that needed to be heard. So I started a foundation. The Grace Thompson Center for Survivor Support. We provide free counseling, legal advocacy, and medical care for survivors of childhood abuse. We train healthcare providers to recognize signs of abuse. We lobby for stronger laws protecting children. And we never, ever tell survivors that they're lying. Last month, a young woman came to the center. She was 19, with haunted eyes and a story that sounded achingly familiar. Her youth pastor had been abusing her since she was 12. Her parents didn't believe her. The church had closed ranks around him. "No one will listen," she said, her voice breaking. "They all think I'm lying." I sat across from her and took her hands in mine. These hands that had once held a scalpel in desperate self-defense, that had learned to heal instead of harm, that had held hundreds of survivors through their darkest moments. "I'm listening," I said, "and I believe you." Her face crumpled, and she cried like she'd been holding it in for years. Maybe she had been. "What do I do?" she asked when she could speak again. "You tell your truth. You let us help you document everything. You let us connect you with a lawyer who specializes in these cases. And you remember that what happened to you is not your fault, and your voice matters." "Will he go to prison?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "The justice system is imperfect. Sometimes the bad guys win. But whether he goes to prison or not, you will survive this. You will heal. You will live a life he couldn't destroy. That's your victory." She looked at me with something like hope. Did you heal?" I thought about that question. About the girl I'd been, 8 years old, sold by her father, trapped in a nightmare for 9 years. About the scalpel I'd held with shaking hands, knowing I could hurt him but choosing not to. About the courage it took to speak, to testify, to face a town that called me a liar. About the life I'd built from those ashes. "Yes," I said, "I healed. Not all at once, not perfectly. There are still hard days, still nightmares sometimes. But I'm here. I'm free, and I've helped hundreds of people find their freedom too. That's healing." Yesterday I received a letter from Jennifer Morrison, Helen's daughter, one of the other survivors from Father Harrow's trial. She's a therapist now, specializing in trauma. She's married, has 2 children, and runs a support group for adult survivors of childhood abuse. "I wanted to thank you again," she wrote, "for being brave enough to speak first. For showing all of us that we could survive this. My daughter asked me yesterday what a hero looks like, and I showed her your picture. I told her that heroes aren't people who aren't afraid. They're people who are terrified but do the right thing anyway. That's you, Grace. You're my hero. I folded that letter and added it to my collection. Dozens of letters from survivors I've helped over the years, each one a reminder that my pain had purpose, that my survival mattered. Sometimes I think about that night, the night I held the scalpel, the night I could have carved him apart, could have made him suffer the way he'd made me suffer. I'm glad I didn't. Not because he deserved mercy, he didn't. But because I deserved better than to carry the weight of his death. I deserved to become a healer, not a killer. I deserved to build a life defined by who I chose to be, not by what he made me do. The scalpel was a symbol of power, yes. But the real power wasn't in the blade. It was in the choice. I chose to speak, I chose to fight, I chose to heal. And that choice saved my life. This morning, I woke early and made myself tea, chamomile, the same kind Dr. Chen used to make for me. I sat by the window and watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who stood at her barred window and dreamed of falling. The one who thought she was nothing, nobody, worthless. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her this: you will survive. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but you will survive. The man who hurt you will be punished. The father who sold you will die alone with his regret. And you will become someone extraordinary. You will save lives. You will give voice to the voiceless. You will turn your pain into purpose and your wounds into wisdom. You will hold a scalpel again, but this time it will be an instrument of healing, not harm. Your hands will close wounds, not create them. Your voice will speak truth, not swallow silence. You will be free. And you will be loved. I finished my tea and looked at the photograph on my mantle. Dr. Chen and me at my nursing school graduation, both of us grinning at the camera. Next to it was my SAN certification, my foundation's charter, letters from survivors, a lifetime of proof that I had mattered, that I had made a difference. The girl I used to be would never have believed this life was possible. But the woman I became made it real. They say a father's love is unconditional. They say the church is a sanctuary. They told me to trust, to obey, to be grateful. But I learned different truths. I learned that survival is an act of defiance. That healing is a choice you make every single day. That justice is worth fighting for, even when the whole world tells you to stay silent. I learned that the same hands that once trembled with fear can grow steady and strong. That the same voice that once choked on silence can speak loud enough to shake foundations. I learned that a scalpel, properly used, doesn't destroy, it excises what is diseased and makes room for healing. And I learned that I was never nothing. I was Grace Thompson, survivor, nurse, advocate, healer, and I was free.